Scott Britton, welcome to What's the Big Idea, brother?
What's up, brother? It's great to see you. Very excited for this, and anytime I get to drop in with you.
Likewise, man. I asked for your permission before we started. I said, do I have permission to talk about some Junto experiences that we shared? And the reason that I asked for permission to share it is because I like to start this podcast oftentimes with some appreciation for the people that I'm having on. Like, why do I want to talk to this person? And ultimately for me, one of the things that I appreciate most about you is the authenticity and skill to which you have shared and continue to share your spiritual journey. And one of the moments to me that's most emblematic of that authenticity is in the midst of our Junto journey, the men's work retreats that I host every quarter. There is this moment where we're doing breath work and we're getting really deep. We're going into like 2-3 minute breath holds. And at one moment during round 3, you had moved away from the group. And all of a sudden we just hear this kind of groaning and this yelling. And I'm just encouraging it. I'm just like, fucking let it rip, let it go. And we concluded the 4th round of the breath work, but you were still in this journey, right? You were still groaning. You were still moving. You were still in whatever experience was moving through you. And you just held on to it. And I just came over and I was like, be with it as long as you want. And you just took that permission and you were in it, and it was strange and it was weird, but also your commitment to just welcoming it all and being with it all. And in all of your writing, the ability to navigate the most tactile and strategic arenas of corporate SaaS and selling a company to SalesForce to week-long meditation retreats and silence and inner work. It's just really masterful. But for me, you're someone who just never occurs to me as a salesman. You're just sharing your own journey. And in the effort of perhaps, like even I talked to you when I saw you in the street today and I said, the book's done. How do you feel? And you said, dude, as long as one person reads it. And I just love the essence of where your creation comes from, of just sharing what's been meaningful to you. And so I'm very excited to go deeper and to have you on today.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate that. You know, a guest that I had on my podcast, Boyd Vardy,
the Lion Hunter.
Lion Trackers,
not Hunter.
Life.
Yeah.
Great dude. But he said it so simply that like our purpose or what makes us feel alive is like find that thing you love and find a way to share with others.
Yeah.
And for me, the thing that I geek out about most, the thing that I love the most, right, is just personal growth and evolution.
Yeah.
Right. And I think just more recently over the past 6, 7, 8 years, it's been this consciousness journey has been the form factor of that. Yeah. And it's just the best, man. So for me, it's a joy to share that stuff.
Yeah. So when was the moment where you realized that so much of your joy was correlated to your growth journey, spiritual exploration? And I invite you to really focus on, like, was there a moment that it clicked for you and you're like, oh, there's energy here, it's generative, it's enjoyable. Like what was that moment for you?
Yeah. So I think there was like a big moment, right? Which was my first psychedelic experience. My first ayahuasca journey was the first time I did anything like that. And that was like a big, like, whoa, there's more to life than I thought. Like, I'm really excited to like start to investigate this stuff. But I would say like on a more consistent basis, my teacher had basically given me homework to just start noticing when I was triggered and writing it down. And that through that exercise, I just started to notice like me seeing things about myself that I didn't see before.
Yeah.
And as a result, being able to kind of have greater agency in those scenarios. So it's like, okay, me getting pissed at a coworker just for something small, like, wait a second, okay, whoa, I'm reacting. Whoa, what's going on there? And then like stopping and then having a better outcome in my life as a result.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was like my life just started getting better.
Yeah.
Right. And I think like that to me is like the essence of why anybody would do any of this stuff is like, is your experience actually improving? And so for me, when I started to see like, okay, this small day-to-day practice of noticing my triggers is like making me more aware, making me better show up in a way that I want to show up more. Whoa, okay. Like maybe my spiritual journey isn't just about doing a big ayahuasca retreat or going on a big meditation retreat. Maybe I can actually kind of make my whole life about this.
Yeah.
And because my life started getting better, that was an interesting thing for me to do.
Yeah. And so, we're here to talk about conscious achievement today. And I think that what you're saying here for me, it invites in a deeper investigation of the conflict that exists between spiritual exploration and achievement in the traditional sense, professionally, economically. And like, even you talked about your big awakening being a psychedelic journey. And like, I was just revisiting last week, like some of the Mark Andreessen tweets about how ayahuasca is ultimately like detrimental to the entrepreneurial experience, right? And this idea that drive and spiritual growth, like inner growth, oftentimes are like inversely correlated, totally. Right? And so what I'm curious about for you, and even in the subtitle of the book, right, it's how to use personal achievement for spiritual growth. And I was curious about why it is how to use personal achievement for spiritual growth versus how to use spiritual growth for personal achievement. And I imagine that there was some intentionality behind that. So,
yeah. Well, I think to take a step back, like, I don't know that many people maybe people do pursue spiritual growth for just because they're attracted to it. But I think for a lot of us like ambitious people, high achievers, we do the standard path, right? We go try to crush it, start companies, like have success in athletics, have success with women, like just be a successful person, right? And, at a certain point, there's like what has this gotten me? How do I feel inside?
Yeah.
And am I just going to keep doing more and more of this?
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of us have to get to that point. And you're absolutely right that there's these narratives that kind of pit that journey against the spiritual growth journey, which is commonly associated with archetypes like, oh, I'm going to be like Ram Dass and go to India, or I'm going to go just meditate all the time and do nothing, or I'm just going to be a super Zen dude. Like there's not a lot of young people, like young models. Like it was like a lot of like old dudes, right? It's like sharing spiritual wisdom.
Yeah.
And what I noticed in my journey, like originally it was like, okay, did achievement track, did it at a pretty high level. I am where I am, right? Maybe I need to go do that. Maybe I need to go in this other direction. And there was actually kind of like that's like icky. That like achievement stuff is like, that was the old me.
Yeah.
Right. And this is a very common thing I see is there's like this kind of like you don't like your old self.
Yeah.
When you go on to make a big change like this. But what started to emerge for me was this boundary between when I began to use everyday life as a mirror to understand my subconscious really.
Yeah.
And all these distortions. I started to realize like, wait a second, like going to a monastery or going to something where all I'm doing is spiritual work is actually a less fertile ground for me to see these parts of my consciousness that are making me unhappy, that are limiting me, that are doing all these things. So I actually kind of need to like play the game in the game I'm already in.
Totally.
And the funny thing about it is, and so the reason that I titled the book that is because I'm really talking to that person who is like me, who's like, okay, maybe there's something here with the spirituality thing, but I still want to be successful in my career. I still want to have a dope house. I still want to have a partner I love. I still want all these things, right? Yeah. And I want to have an impact.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like you can do all those things.
Yeah.
And you can use all those things.
Yeah.
For this other thing that is going to provide a more durable sense of fulfillment.
Yeah.
In my experience. And so that's kind of like why it is framed that way. And the interesting thing is I noticed this kind of I think of like the infinity sign where like one feeds the other, right?
Sure.
Or for me, the spiral where it's like, as I go deeper on my spiritual journey, which to me is like really all about understanding truth, like the truth about myself, the truth about reality, just my capacity to see things. As I do that and my capacity to align to truth and the true way of things, I'm actually more capable. I'm actually more robust in my ability to accomplish things and do so in a way that's aligned. And then that gives me more opportunities to go deeper on the spiritual path.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of like both feeds the other dynamic that's very beautiful. And hopefully just showcases to some people that like, you don't have to choose.
Yeah.
Like you can do both.
Totally. So let me ask a challenging question to you, which is that you have had a successful exit. You went on that journey. You climbed the linear mountain before it seems like you unlocked the spiral, which I'm going to ask you about. And so I think that my mom is a speech coach, and she always says, like, address objections up front. And so what would you say to the people who are still in the game of striving, who have not hit the financial freedom that they're seeking, who haven't gotten there yet, who say that spiritual growth, if you're just looking at it in the lens of like Maslow's hierarchy and self-actualization and this kind of growth, I'm curious what you would say to those people who are still operating with some semblance of scarcity in their professional life, of like why to those people, like they're going to actually, like if they commit to this practice, they're going to be more successful in that pursuit anyway.
Yeah. Well, let me share. My journey started 3 years before I exited my company.
Cool.
I probably had less than 20 grand to my name. And so I made the choice before I had quote unquote won the game in any way. And I had other accolades, right? But like I definitely wasn't set financially.
Sure, yeah.
And but I just was like, dude, I'm playing the wrong game.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, just to share some history here, just to like frame it up, it was like I went to the best school. I went to Princeton. I was captain of the football team. I was the president of my fraternity. I like worked for a tech startup that had $100 million exit, even though I didn't make a lot of money. Like won the Forbes 30 under 30. Like kind of like did all these things, right? That like were like you're successful.
Yeah.
And I wasn't fucking happy, dude.
Yeah.
And so like I knew I had to switch it up, and before I had quote unquote won the game. And the interesting thing was like I had about a year of total disillusionment with my startup while I was like reorienting my life towards spirituality. I called myself like an attendant to the company.
Yeah.
Where it was like I was showing up, I was doing the things that needed to get done, but I wasn't thinking about it in the shower anymore. I wasn't reading startup books. I wasn't listening to startup podcasts. I was like doing what needed to get done and nothing else. But that the thing that was interesting is that when I was prioritizing the spiritual work, I noticed that like my life was getting better in ways that my startup didn't solve, right? It was making me have more fun. It was making me like care less about small things that didn't matter. And it was actually never about the increasing success for me that got me on the journey. It was more about like, I just want to feel good most of the time. You know, I just don't want to suffer so much. And it was only after probably like a couple years of focusing on like, how do I just become a more fulfilled, happy person, that I started to have these unlocks that were like, wait a second, this is actually helping me in the material world in a way that I never anticipated. And I think everyone's journey is unique and different, but there's definitely a game you can play of using spirituality to get stuff, right? Like I'm going to like grow spiritually so I can crush it at my company. And that can work to some extent, right? But there's also a ceiling to that. Like there's like a definite ceiling you will hit in the spiritual journey with that approach. And maybe that's fine. But it's just something I think a lot of people should be aware of.
Yeah. And then as you start to move along the path, and perhaps you've achieved some of these levels of safety, security, and then you're starting to ask yourself, okay, well, what is the difference between success? Like you had just defined it. You had won all the games that you had played, athletic, academic, professional. So I'm curious, like for you, how do you define success versus fulfillment?
Well, I think success is a concept that is largely inherited for us. Like a successful dude in the US, like I was like, oh dude, I want to be a tech entrepreneur who's crushed it and had all like owns an island, right? Or something ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then you go to another part of the world and maybe success means having 8 kids. You know, like I look at the Orthodox Jews in New York City, it was like having a ton of kids was like, you are a successful dude.
Yeah.
And so success to me is mostly about what have we been programmed to believe will make us feel good about ourselves. And fulfillment is more like a state. It's more a state of enduring well-being. And so I can feel joy. I can feel good about myself. And it isn't really related to whether I have neatly fit and aligned to some archetype that was bestowed upon me by society. And so that's how I differentiate those two. And for me, it's like this like felt sense of fulfillment is what I'm going for. And that really is all about what, in my experience, being in alignment. You know, being in alignment with your truth, being in alignment with what feels good, being in alignment with whatever your understanding is about why you're here and what lights you up.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's just kind of a never-ending game of tuning into that and continuously aligning to it.
Yeah. Neville Goddard was a famous thought leader in like the 40s and 50s. He was kind of a precursor to The Secret. He has a banger of a quote, and he says, "Everyone is doing what they're doing because of how they think it will make them feel."
Truth.
The secret is getting clear about how you'd like to feel and then reverse engineering what it is you can do right now to cultivate that felt state. And
I love that, man.
Isn't that a good one? And so it's like now if we're reorienting from traditional success, and you so beautifully talk about this in the book about like kind of the outside in complex, right? And so if you're going to say a little more about that, of like as we start to reorient our center of gravity from like I want to achieve externally, it's going to make me feel something, to it's like, well, actually fulfillment, true success perhaps is that felt state. We're looking more internally. And so as you start to orient towards that, what is the path where someone says, okay, well, if I want well-being, how do I define what that is for me? And how do I start to develop a practice that allows me to cultivate that?
Yeah, great question. And, you know, the answer is one that the way I think about it continuously changes, but I think a really interesting idea, so just to talk about the outside in paradigm quickly.
Yeah, please.
Is it's a very simple idea. It's like the way that I feel and feeling good is contingent upon my outside world. So I'm going to try to control the outside world and change it and mold it and do this and that so that I can feel good about myself. And I just think about all this shit I used to do where it was like, okay, like I need to have a perfect body. I need to work out 6 times a week. I need to eat certain things. I need to have women like me. I need to be thought of well in my career. Like I need all of these things to feel good, right? And that's like classic outside in paradigm. And it's a freaking prison, dude. Like, and it's kind of funny because I see like longevity and biohacking and all this stuff, and there's a lot of good stuff there. But I also, as somebody who like did that for a long time, it's like classic prison creation. And this whole like, all the chess pieces need to be perfectly organized on the board for me to feel good. And I think like when you realize what you said about what Neville Goddard's quote, and for me, Michael Singer was the big one who's like, everybody's just trying to feel a certain way, doing everything to feel a certain way. It's like, it's kind of just the intelligent thing to do to just go directly for that. It's like, cool, I'm actually trying to feel a certain way. Let's just like figure out how to do that. And there's a lot of different ideas that people have about how to do that. But one of the interesting ideas that I was exposed to from my spiritual teacher was like, your actual like innate essence, your true self, whatever you want to call it, your soul, is actually freaking great all the time. Like, it just is already there, dude. Yeah. Like, and the only reason that you're not living like that is because there are things in your consciousness that are covering that up and that are kind of like making it impossible for that natural essence to shine through. And so, I bought into that idea. And part of the reason I think I did was because I had some type of altered state experience where I was like, whoa, like I feel all this amazing love and like I feel totally safe and I feel all these things. So I had like tasted it.
Yeah.
And then it was like, how do I get back to it? And for me, the path to getting back to it was, it's like, okay, if my true self is trusting, safe, loving, all these things I want, well, I need to start noticing when I don't feel those things. And then I need to go in and use that as an entry point to go into my consciousness and understanding why that is, right? And this started a lot of practices for me that are similar to emotional inquiry that I know you teach, where it's like you have this feeling, you go into it, you can start to kind of develop tools to like go into your subconscious and query what's going on. And what became really obvious.
Can I pause you? Can you imagine the listener today, like while they're listening to this, while they're watching this, like if you were going to help them to notice the next trigger that came up, like actually walk them through the process of like, if you were kind of offering that practice, like, so they notice, like how would they even track the trigger in their body, like in their mind? And what would be like the practical tools that you would give them of like, here's how you would investigate the trigger and become aware of it in a way that's helpful.
So there's a continuum of that's aligned to essentially your level of awareness. So I think the first easy one is just like overt triggers, like times where you just blow up and you're pissed. You yell at your partner, you're on the phone with somebody and you're like, you're just angry. It's like, okay, that's easy. Like you can, install it in your head. Like next time I'm like really annoyed at something, I'm just going to try to remember that. And what I did is I kept an iPhone note. I now call it my freedom log, and I would just write down the instance. It was like, okay, cool. I just yelled at a customer service person. I feel ripped off by whatever, like, I'm going to write down a little bit, like 3 words about that experience. As your awareness expands and you start to do these practices, you start to develop things like interoception, which is your capacity to feel the sensations in your body. I didn't feel shit in my body until I was like age 30. Like I just like didn't know I couldn't feel things. But as I started to do these practices, I started to develop this kind of like new sensory perception of like, whoa, there's tightness in my abs. Like my abs are holding. Or like, oh, my neck is like really thin, or my jaws, like all these different feelings, right? And so the more you do these practices and the more you work on noticing, you'll start to, specifically somatic practices, I would say, like things like emotional inquiry, things like just like learning how to feel in your body. You can then start to like expand that aperture of like what is a trigger by noticing like what happens in your body. And starting to be like, whoa, I really pulsed up when I did this. Or I noticed I started sweating when I had to have this conversation. Or like, I noticed like looking at my bank account, like really like kind of made me get small and like tight. And so, I have this like concentric circle diagram where it's like, cool, you have overt triggers and then you have like these subtle like perceptions. And then there's like other things that you can start to look at too, where it's like when you develop a level of witness consciousness, which is your capacity to basically observe your thoughts as an independent person, you can start to look at the way you perceive things, right? It's like, okay, well, if I am judging someone, then my heart's closed, If I just had an example the other day where, and by the way, I still have like a lot of these every day, right? Like I'm still on my journey for sure. But like I had one yesterday or 2 days come up where there's just like, I'm listening to this podcaster. He's got a huge show, hundreds of thousands of followers. And I'm like, this guy's not that good of a podcaster. I'm like, he kind of just like rambles and like doesn't ask good questions. And like, I should have a podcast this big, kind of like that comparison pattern, right?
Yeah.
But like, I'm able to notice that tendency in my mind and then start to go in that, right? And I think so you can kind of like use, it's just like the pie expands for the opportunities that you can start to use. And all of these things, that initial thing that you're noticing just becomes like, okay, the entry point, like the tip of the spear, like let's go in now, let's see what's behind this, right? And I can tell you, like, for the example with the podcaster, I did go into that, and it was like, cool, I have this pattern of wanting to be important. Why do I want to be important? Well, there's like some things that happened to me as a kid, start to see some of those mental images, and yeah, there's a low self-esteem. There's like a sense of not enoughness, right, behind that. And it's like, that's like the ultimate wound that like we all have.
Sure.
Right. And so you can start to like get clarity on like, what are at the root of the ways that I'm feeling, my feelings, my reactions, my ways of perceiving. And is that actually true? Right. And is that actually who I want to be? Mm-hmm. And that's where you can start to kind of like remold the clay, if you will, of your consciousness.
And where do you land, even in that specific example with the podcaster, as you start to investigate the not enoughness? How do you land the proverbial plane there?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm really focused on opening my heart, and we can talk about like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
But it's really just bringing like love into the system. Right. And so like that part of me that doesn't feel enough, you can use innate abilities of your consciousness to shift the energy and information around that by feeling. And so like, I think of like our consciousness is like this big field and like, just like container of just like energy and information of like everything we've ever experienced, like everything we've ever felt, like it's all there. It's like this big, mess of things, right? And like, you can try this on yourself. Like a listener at any time could like use their mind and use their intention to just like feel gratitude. Most people have probably done that. You could use it to feel love. You have that innate capacity of the consciousness to change your state. And so when you get to that, I'm not enough, or whatever it is, like at that point, there's levels of this too, but you can use your intention to move into self-love, to move into a deep sense of trust, to move in a deep sense of gratitude. And what you're doing there is you're not actually, my belief is you're doing more than just feeling good in the moment. You're actually shifting the energy and information of your entire system permanently. And we can just do this over and over and over and over and over again. And the reason for this is like, that change, in my opinion, is permanent, or it's enduring. And so we're trying to kind of gradually reconstruct our consciousness so that our hearts can be open all the time, right? So I look at another podcaster and I'm like, dude, good for that guy, man. He's crushing it.
Totally.
That's sick, right? Instead of like my automatic reaction being like comparing myself.
Totally. And, I think I'll double click on it as well, because it is a nice segue into another concept from the book of dirty fuel and clean fuel. And what I would point on here, it's that shame, not enoughness, fundamental brokenness. It's just an intrinsic human experience. We all have it. And that if you were to respond to the not enoughness that you became aware of, which you would have unconsciously, it would have motivated you, right, to go and like perhaps like do something, to create more, to build a better funnel for your program, because it doesn't want to feel like it's not enough.
Right.
And so it will provide motivation for you to go out and act. But what you've talked about is, right, it's like how like that dirty fuel is some sort of ego lack, and that even if you had accomplished success that was motivated by that sense of lack or not enoughness, if you accomplish the success, which is now Scott has hundreds of thousands of followers, that unconscious not enoughness still remains.
That's right.
And so it will just find some new externality to point to that you have not achieved yet, So that not enoughness remains. The foundation is faulty. And so like you've talked about, and what I'm really excited for you to talk about is the distinction of dirty fuel versus clean fuel, and how I think for a lot of people, when they think about like, well, if I go on this path and I lose some of these scarcity motivators that I've had that have been essential to me creating in the world, achieving, then will I just become the Zen monk on the mountaintop who withdraws from society, who no longer has motivation to create or strive? And so I'd be curious to hear more about.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a classic challenge for like every ambitious person who contemplates or considers going on this path, right? Yeah. And the number of times I've like said to my teacher or somebody like, so what am I supposed to do? Literally nothing? Just like sit here, right? Like, first off, try to do nothing for a day and see if you can do it. There's no chance. Like the whole idea that going on this path is like you're going to do nothing just is like fundamentally not true, because like we're not capable of just doing nothing all day. And yeah, what I started to observe with a lot of like this exercise around, you know, moving towards a goal, noticing myself getting all pissed or whatever when I didn't want, like another great example is like striving for something, not getting it, and then that being really triggering, right? I remember, you know, one of the examples I talk about in my book is like we tried to sell our company, like we failed 3 times before we actually did. And each one of those times was like completely gut-wrenching, right? And to your point, like our society tends to like use that like hustle culture as like, all right, get back up, like pick yourself back up and get back out there, right? And that's fine, but it never fundamentally addresses the root of like why you're suffering in response to that. And there's this idea of like a hungry ghost. Have you heard about that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's like you just keep going, you keep going. And I see this with startup founders all the time, right? It's like, you know, they sell their company and then they want to do a bigger one, and they want to do a bigger one, and they want a bigger one. And their story is that they love doing startups. And maybe they do, right? 100%. But I'm also, if I was a betting man, there's probably a lot of people in there that are operating from a subconscious belief that they're not enough, or there's something wrong with them, or they need to do more, right, to be loved. And so I had that, right? With I've looked at my stuff a lot, and I've had a lot of that. And so it just becomes the more intelligent thing to work directly on that. And so if we talk about clean fuel or ambition, clean fuel or dirty fuel, it's like a metaphor for ambition, where it's really where does the context of why you want to do something, of your motivation, and where is it coming from? And so dirty fuel is all that stuff we talked about, right? It's the not enoughness, it's needing to prove myself, it's needing to be important, it's needing to be right. It's like all these things that are like fundamentally not coming from a place of like your deeper essence. And the problem with them is, and the problem with dirty fuel is eventually like it runs out, like it burns out. Like you can't just keep living off of that. It's unsustainable. And believe me, I've tried. And so there is an alternative though, which is having a sense of ambition that's rooted in something like inspiration, like love, like a desire to contribute, a desire to express yourself fully in the world. Like one of the ideas that I loved from Junto was you talking about this notion of like being a fully expressed man. Like, hell yeah. Like that's exciting. And so the path to getting to having more clean fuel is using the times where you notice you have dirty fuel and healing those, right? Doing like an exercise like we talked about. It's like, oh, okay, I don't feel enough. I work on my not enoughness. All of a sudden that's not as triggering, but there's also more room because there's less clouds over my like natural essence. There's also more room for me to see what does light me up. More room to feel inspired, more room to feel love. And you can create from that place in a much more sustainable way.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's like how many people listening to this show have done something as a means to an end, right? Like most of the things I've tried where it's like, I'm going to do this thing to like make a lot of money just to make a lot of money, or like, I'm going to try to get social media followers or whatever it is, just to like get this thing. Like, it doesn't work for me. It doesn't last. Right. And I think that means to an end idea is usually coming from a dirty fuel place.
Yeah. One of the things that I would push back on there a little bit is that I think that it does work, but it's oftentimes myopic in scope. That it's like, if you're using these scarcity fuel sources, if you're doing it for like an outcome, what's in it for me, that like you can motivate, like dirty fuel. It's fuel, it will drive you, but like you will lose track of your felt state, like your ability to welcome it all, like relationships, well-being, right? It's like that it does work. And that's oftentimes like what I think is important there. It's to say, it's like you can achieve in this game that you're playing using these fuel sources, but like also it's going to be difficult to sustain that for a long time, to welcome in other aspects of living your life fully, creating thriving relationships. And so it's this idea of like, it will work. It will continue to motivate you. It'll chock you full of adrenaline, right? And drive you to do things, but at what cost?
Right.
And like over what time scale? My personal experience is like with Tribute. It's we got to a place in 2018 where we were running the company. We had enough money to keep like 5 people on staff. We couldn't pay me and my co-founder anymore. We had a conversation. It was like, do we want to keep this thing going? And ultimately, we loved that company so much. We believed so deeply in what it was doing for relationships. And so we kept on a skeleton crew. It was just me. My co-founder went and got a job at Google. I was coaching full time. And 2 years later, COVID happened. And we ended up 40Xing the company in a year.
Wow.
Because we were there. And like when people asked me, like, what's the secret to success? And it was like, loving the shit out of your company. Because if I didn't love this thing, if I didn't believe in what it was doing for humanity and our customers, zero chance it would have existed.
Yeah. Folded.
Like that's it. And so, and I think that so much of the people that we look at, and pretty much everybody who I have on this podcast, like what they have in common is that they're doing what they want to be doing, right? It's like, sure, they're striving for massive outcomes and contributions in society, but they're just doing it because they want to be doing it. So I'm curious, like if people want to make that switch into the clean fuel sources, you talked about a couple of those, right? It's like, how can I contribute in society? How would you help someone to start to identify some of those clean fuel sources for themselves, of like where they can really choose to motivate themselves from?
Yeah. Well, I do want to, thank you for, I think you're spot on. The dirty fuel can work. I do want to just call something out though.
Yeah.
My belief is that the point at which that stops working is unique for everybody.
Yeah.
Like I see people out there right now running on dirty fuel, killing it. Right. And I'm just like, okay. And I think that like my belief is like, we do have this kind of like higher self soul that's like constantly trying to realign us to what we came here to do. And for some of us, like when it's time to kind of play this new game that we're talking about of consciousness and like getting on track to like whatever your intention is for your life, like that shit just stops working.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how hard you try. And like I have a lot of examples of this, of like tried and true dirty fuel tactic, dirty fuel place, worked for me forever. And no matter what I do, no matter how clever, no matter how like ingenious I am, it just doesn't work. And so I think like for people listening, it's something to be aware of, right? Like if things are working for you, great, just keep doing it. But if you're not, like this whole fuel source conversation and like consciousness stuff, like it might be time to look inward,
Reevaluate.
and reevaluate, because maybe you're kind of getting some guidance to show up in a different way and to approach things differently.
Who do you look at as the people who embody this kind of like clean fuel source in the world? Who are, for you, because you talked about earlier, who so many of the spiritual leaders of past generations were elders, and now here we are, like 40s, late 30s, and I'm curious for you, who embodies these principles?
I think like traditionally, like artists in general have been more aligned to this than people in the business world, where it's like, I just write books because I just can't not write them, right? And you look at people like Stephen King, like writing like 5 books a year, and you're just like forever, right? And you're like, how the hell does that dude do that, right? And yeah, there's just all across all these different forms of art, right? There's just people that just like, I mean, they made it eventually, right? But they spent so long just like slogging it out to try to get there, not because they like needed to be special, but because they loved it. They couldn't not do it, right? And I think, frankly, in the business world, there's less examples of that. And so people, I think athletes are another great example too, by the way, of some people that just like for the love of the game, if you will.
Sure.
But I think one of my challenges is that, or one of the challenges I think we have as a society is that I don't know that there's as many great examples of people in the business world that are just doing the thing because they love it and have always been doing that. I think some people seem like they get lucky and they just found their, like, how many people were like, I wanted to be a doctor as a kid. I became a doctor and I love being a doctor. Great, cool, good for you. That wasn't my thing. So yeah, man, I guess where I'm going with this is like, I'm excited to see more people in the business world that are, I guess, like intentionally moving from a place of love and inspiration at all times. And I'm sure there's plenty of them, but there's nobody that less so business people, frankly, that I deeply admire about this. And I think you would ask a question around like, okay, well, how do you identify these fuel sources? Like these, like, I want to move into that place. Cool. Mm-hmm. Let's do the inspiration. Let's do the love. Like there's kind of the practical shit. And then there's like in my opinion, the deeper work. And so the practical stuff is like, take an inventory of what you love, right? Yeah. Try to spend more time doing that. Like one thing I realized about my journey is like, I didn't actually trust inspiration because I would start my day and I'd be like, feel like really inspired to like, oh, there's this like new like AI thing, or is this new, I like want to write a blog post or whatever, but it's like, yeah, but I have this prioritized checklist of things that are the most high leverage that's what I'm going to do.
Sure.
Instead of, I feel this innate pull towards doing something. And so I'd say one thing people can do is they can start to run experiments with following that. Like give yourself 15 minutes every day for a week, maybe 30 minutes. What happens when you just do the thing that you actually want to do in the beginning of your day? Do anything good happen? Is it safe? Are you led somewhere interesting or cool that maybe you wouldn't have been otherwise? And so like building a sense of trust for these things, I think is huge. But I think what also happens when you really start to do a lot of deep work is that like, it's kind of like there's a curtain, right? And behind that curtain of you, there's been the thing that you always were meant to do. There's been the thing that you came on this earth to do, right? It's like your soul's purpose. It's like your freaking thing. And it's always been there, but you can't see it because it's outside of your awareness. And so as you do a lot of this healing and consciousness work, there's this very organic emergence of the thing, right? And all of the patterns and the stories and the limiting beliefs, which are part of working on your consciousness, as you kind of pull those away, right? It's not only like, what is the thing that lights me up, but also like all the little obstacles and tripwires that prevent me from actually doing it start to disappear. And so for me, I always like to think about it. It's like, I don't think that you can just go to the clean fuel store and pour some gas, like buy some clean fuel, right? Or even make an intellectual decision. But I think the continuous pursuit of cleaning up your subconscious and all this stuff, which you can use achievement, the path of achievement to do, it's a gradual unveiling of all this, right? It's a gradual unveiling of like, what lights you up, right? Yeah. And you don't have the debris in front of it to allow you to go do it freely.
Yeah. Well, so what has emerged for you? What's the thing that you're...
Dude, I mean, well, I think for one, just like high level, like uplifting human consciousness, and specifically changing the narrative around the whole like separation of the spiritual path and all these things we want in our life. Like the traditional narrative and traditional way of living is like, go to church on Sunday, whatever. Do your meditation 20 minutes, go to your job. Like, go on an ayahuasca retreat twice a year, have a big thing, and then like go back to your life. And what I'm trying to say is like, no, actually like these are integrated. Like it is all one thing. And so doing that with a book, doing that with my business Conscious Talent, doing that with my podcasts, doing it with communities. And so for me, it's like spreading that idea is what lights me up. And I think what also is coming into like my whole world again is like, I remember when I was a kid, I loved getting up in front of people and like speaking, right? I loved it, dude. And I was always the class clown. I was always the person on stage. Like in college, you know, we would have these recruiting weekends for football.
You can literally look into Scott's eyes right now and his smile is giddy because there's so much truth in what you're saying. Like, it's like you can feel your body even remembering these things that you just loved. Your body language changed. You have this big smile on your face. Like I can feel the inspiration.
That's it, dude. And I think, and so for me, this whole like speaking and inspiring, and I had a story in my early 20s where I like thought I would do that. I was like, yo, like it would be cool to be Tony Robbins, right? Like it would be cool to like be one of those guys. But there were so many beliefs and stories and crap in my consciousness that prevented me from going directly towards that. One of those ideas was, well, I haven't achieved enough yet to do that. And my experience had been working for this tech startup that sold, and I had saw the founder had gotten all this credibility and success and all these things. And I was like, well, I need to go do that before I do the thing I really want to do, right? And we all have that story about something. And so now I'm like, coming back into this like recognition of like, I totally forgot about that dream, by the way. Like I totally forgot about like speaking and inspiring. It was like for a long time for me, it was like build a successful startup, then like build more and then become a venture capital and like holding company, like all this crap. Right. And more recently it's like, no, dude, you want to do transformation work and you want to like lead people on stage. You want to spread ideas. You want to create transformational experiences. So that's what's emerging for me is like a revitalization of that idea and dream and passion. And I'm stoked, man.
Yeah.
I'm stoked.
You know, I was listening to you talk and I had this thought and I felt my whole body just release like any semblance of any tension that I was holding, which is, you're talking about this practice of just connecting to the thing that you just naturally enjoy doing. And I just had this thought, which I used to do a lot of work on social anxiety. And one of the deepest truths I ever encountered there was the idea that anytime I'm feeling social anxiety, it's because I'm telling myself I need to be different than I am. And I find that even as we start to explore these things that we're naturally energized by, that we have so much context or beliefs around how impractical it would be to commit to this thing, right? To be a public speaker. I haven't done enough there, right? If I was to be an artist, that's not going to produce, can't be responsible,
right?
Father, mother, whatever it might be. But that idea that what I'll layer on top of what you were just saying there is this idea that what you enjoy doing, to give yourself to doing it in some capacity and separating it from the idea that it needs to be the totality of your vocation immediately or what it is that you're doing professionally. But for me, my experience is like, as I start to connect to that which is naturally energizing and try and give myself more to it, that is the journey. Not that it will ultimately consume the whole of my energy and contribution professionally, but that to give myself to it in the capacity that I'm available for is the journey. And like the idea is that the more that I do it, like typically it's where I'm more lit up, where I'm able to contribute. It's like then it will grow over time, right?
100%. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, of course.
First, I want to know, like for you, what's the answer to the question around like, you know, the things that really light you up? And then my follow on is like, Have you noticed in any way that as you step towards that, right? You talked about like kind of taking small steps, doesn't maybe need to be the whole thing. Have you noticed that life seems to take a step towards you in terms of like how things start to conspire around you?
Yeah, very much so. You know, my experience with what we're talking about here is that I similarly like was around a lot of entrepreneurs from a very young age. My mom is an author, and we were at conferences with successful people, thought leaders, and so I had this frame of consciousness, very fortunate, of like, oh, that's possible. You can create your own thing. You can make money. You can have freedom and control over your time. And so I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and then young age, get into like the Summit Series and Davos crew. And like I see all these people doing it. I'm like, okay, well, that's the thing. I will do that. And then I will be enough, and I will belong to this community, and I'll feel good about myself finally. And so, you know, even building Tribute and going down the venture path. But while I was building my startup, I had an executive coach who a year in, things were not going great, and we were talking to each other, and she looks at me in our second session. She's like, I know you're doing the CEO thing and you care about this company, but you're a coach. Just like straight to the face. She's like, you're a coach. This is what you're meant to do. And I was just completely unavailable to receive that. Like in some minor capacity, I started training with her. I started teaching some of her workshops, this incredible woman, Lauren Zander, and the Handel method. But I was not available the same way that you shut down the Tony Robbins dream. I was like, no, that doesn't have the esteem, the respect of the exit. So I was just like not available to hear it then. And then finally, you know, over the past 5 years, where it became just more present to me. I've been leading these retreats for like 8 years now, and finally Tribute had kind of hit its inflection moment. It stabilized, and I could finally like responsibly start to like open myself up to this. And as I've finally given myself fully to coaching, to transformational group experiences, like what I have found is this, I think of it as the motivation flywheel, where it's, whether it's coaching, whether it's having a conversation like this as a podcaster, it's that these things are things that I want to be world class at. That it's a skill that I care about so deeply. I read about it in my free time. Like you talked about, I no longer think about my startup in the shower. Like such a great, like just like throwback there of like, what are the things that you think about in the shower when you're going to sleep? Just naturally. So I have these things now that I'm obsessed with. And so I just want to do them. And so even again, it's like 3 years ago now, starting out with a coach, and I had $0 of revenue, right? It's like now, like, you know, it's approaching like 7 figures of revenue. But just because I got to do this thing that I love, contribute, and then to do the thing, I had to practice all the stuff that I was learning, which then gave me more opportunities to do it. So it was this motivation flywheel of like, yeah, I just get to do the thing that I love, get better at it, practice it. I just get even better at it. And like, or it's a spiral, right? And like around we go. And so yeah, that is really, you know, and I'd love for you to elaborate on what you mean by life stepping towards you, but it is just that. It's like, it feels like for me, that flywheel of like, the more that I do this thing, the more enjoyable it becomes now, the better I become at it, the more I'm compensated for it. And that's what I think is like, when I talk to a lot of CEOs and founders that I'm working with, is this idea that if you start to really focus your attention on these areas that you naturally love and that you want to be best at, that is where you're going to make your greatest contribution to your company.
Truth.
And strategically, you can start to focus on who are the people who I can bring in to do these other things that I am not excellent at, or perhaps that I'm excellent at, but not energized by, but not world-class at. And it's just like a subtle shift in how we start to lead and like allocate our time. So that's how
I love it, man. I love it. Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting. It's like you had someone tell you that you're really good at this thing, right? And instead of the initial reaction being like, cool, I'm going to like lean in, right? It's like, oh, wait, well, that's not aligned with this idea of what I should be, right? And as you leaned in, like, you know, your life, you're flourishing because of that whole flywheel that you talked about.
Yeah.
Which is incredible.
Well, tell me more about, so you talked about life kind of coming towards you, stepping towards you. And I'm curious if you could say more about like how your relationship to life as a whole has started to shift in terms of like, what is your experience now and what are you optimizing for it? How are you meeting life?
Yep.
And how has that changed?
Great question. We'll talk about capital L life. I think like my concept around what reality was for a long time was very oriented around like this idea of linear cause and effect, and of like me being this like rogue agent where I'm like, okay, I'm in this world and I need to like do all the right things and make all the best decisions, and then like good things will happen, right? And again, like that works up until a certain extent, at least for me. And I remember that I started to notice this really interesting phenomena at some point in my journey, where as I had made changes in my inner world, my outer world would shift, right? And it was so, the synchronicities were so insane that it was just hard to deny. And I'll give you an example. Like I talked about selling my company, right? On the last time that we sold our company, we had a bunch of stuff come up that like completely jeopardized the deal, and it threw me into a complete spiral, right? And I remember I was working a lot with attachments at that point, and I was like, oh, well, okay, I'm attached to selling this company. And so immediately after I was done like sulking and all this stuff, I like went into my practices, and like I really, really just let go. I really was like, I'm at a point where I do not give up about what happens with this company. Whatever you want to do here, like so be it, universe. Hours later, I like walk out of my house and I get pinged with this information in my awareness to like go back to my computer. And so I'm like, okay. And I've been working a lot with like intuition and guides and guidance at this point. And so I go back, and long story short, I like solved the whole problem of like how to basically save the sale in like 10 minutes. And it was like a just complete download of information. And I just started to have a lot of stuff like this happen to me. And what that did is it shifted my reality paradigm from just this like do X and Y, Z happens, to like the outer world responds to my inner world. And so like as I make changes in my inner world, like the outer world will reflect those back to me based on like the events, the people, the things that come in, right? And I noticed there seemed to be some like principles of like how this functioned. And one of those principles seemed to be about getting me in alignment with my authenticity, where it's like I would have opportunities to like do the thing that I really wanted to do, or to like step into my truth. And if I didn't take them, things would go really bad, or things would be hard. There'd be friction, like things wouldn't go well. And if I did, right, or if I did some inner work that was like related to like unblocking that, like the situation would shift. And this happened again and again and again and again. And so for me, like I believe there's this algorithm in reality. It's supporting our evolution of consciousness. It wants us all to grow, but it also wants us to come here and do the things that we intended to. Like what, and we don't know perfectly what that is, right? But there does seem to be like a path, right? There seems to be like a flag in the sand, like, okay, you wanted to be a speaker, or you wanted to be a coach, or you wanted to be whatever, like you wanted to heal the relationship with your mom, whatever it is. And so, yeah, I just noticed like as I kind of work with that and work with the signs that life is giving me and in my own inner world, like, and step towards them, then life conspires in a way that is supportive for me. And so that's what I meant by it. And I got to say, man, like I love the belief that we live in like a benevolent universe that's like literally moving the chess pieces of other people around you in order to move you into that greater authenticity. And whether it's true or not, I don't know that we'll be able to prove it. Yeah. But do I love that belief, and does it make my life better and feel magical? It does. Yeah. And that to me is worth it.
And so, and what is your model of like when you are connected to that intuition, those messages that are coming to you? What is that?
My model is that we have a, like you could call it a soul. I call it my true self. but we have an eternal essence that lives. It's basically infinite. Like it just lives it's lived many lifetimes, had many experiences. It'll have more. That was one of the first messages that came to me in my first ayahuasca experience was, you've been here many times, you'll be here many times before. And I had access to this connection with that part of my being. And it was like I was having a conversation with someone in my head that wasn't me. And it was like very distinct. And so, yeah, I think we have access to that kind of like, we have a core essence. We can get the connection back onto it. And that core essence ladders up to like the creator of everything. Right. And so like it's a fragment of that here experiencing itself in this time, space, earth plane, whatever.
Turquoise blue world.
Turquoise blue podcast room. Like that's really what my soul wanted today. And so, yeah, man, like, and what I've noticed is that like that part of my essence, like it never leads me astray. And it can see around corners. And another cool story where I really started to like realize the power of this was when I was buying my first house in Austin. So we were doing these practices. My teacher had told me to kind of start like querying this true self. And I was kind of just screwing around like, okay, should I go out with this girl? Like, should I take a meeting with this person? But with this house, I had lost this house. It was like, I decided to buy a house in Austin. This house, somebody else got it. And I was like, all right, well, I lost it. And then my realtor came back to me and was like, hey, I had put in an offer, but it was lower than what the asking was essentially. And the realtor came back and said, hey, they didn't take the offer. Like, do you want to put in a new offer? And the price had been set, and the price was like $25K more than I offered. And I was like, you know what, screw it. I'm going to like try this like whole like ask the true self thing.
Yeah.
And so I dropped in, I asked, a number came back, and it was like $10,000 less than like what the winning offer was. Mm-hmm. And I told my realtor, and he's like, you know, you're not going to get the house because the offer's already been set. And there was like 5 people that bid on it. And the price has been set. Like, you should bid more. And I was like, well, I already lost it anyway. So why don't we just throw this one in?
You didn't tell him that your true essence?
Yeah. He didn't ask me why. And I was like, oh yeah, my true download from the true self. And so I put in the offer, and then he gets back to me like a week later. He's like, you got the house and you didn't have the highest offer, but for some reason the people chose you. And I never found out why, but I was like, huh, like maybe there's something here. Yeah. And that's really when like kind of making decisions and using that kind of like connection to this like inner wisdom started to become a big part of my life after that.
Yeah. Beautiful. And you had talked about this belief that's not true, but supports you living life the way that you want. And I'm curious, along your journey, what have been some of the other empowering beliefs that you have adopted or that cultivate kind of your quality of experience that is really meaningful?
Yeah. And I think it's like, it's a really good point that you're bringing up around like, at the end of the day, like we get to choose what we believe. Right. And that means that like you can pick stuff that makes you feel good and have a great experience. And for me, that's enough versus like quantum physics said, right? But even though quantum physics is apparently saying a lot of this stuff that has been associated with spiritualism, but for me, a couple of things come to mind. Like one, like everything here is happening for my evolution, and specifically the evolution of my consciousness. So, you know, a lot of bad shit happens, like in life, like tough things happen. Like I just found out I have a tick illness. Like, you know, I don't want to say the L word, but like, looks like it's that. And that might explain a lot of why I've struggled so much with my health for many years. And my belief that everything is happening for my evolution reframes this as like, okay, cool. Like, yeah, I'm going to acknowledge this sucks.
Totally.
But also like, how have I grown in ways that I would have never had to if this wasn't happening.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like a profound number of ways. And so it's really like empowering to me to believe that. And the other one I got to talk about is around money, right? Because like money is like a whole cobweb of shit when it comes to beliefs. And I grew up in a very Christian household where like there's all these ideas from like the Bible and you go to hell if you're rich and just like all kinds of crap. And I've had to do a lot of unwinding there. But I really believe that that there is an infinite supply. Like I believe we live in a universe. Like I believe there is like a creator of this experience that is infinite in its capacity to supply. And the idea that there's only so much can go around is just a concept. That's a belief too. Mm-hmm. And so I choose to believe that, yeah, there's an infinite supply of resources. You can have as much as you want. And really your ability to align to that is like a capacity issue, which is a consciousness thing. And so
say more. Like our ability to adopt a belief is a capacity thing.
Well, so I think like our capacity to be like, there's a great book called Love Money, Money Loves You. And the idea is like money is like a system of exchange. And like in order for you, it's an energy and a system of exchange. And like, in order for you to be like a great receiver of money, you also have to be a great director and channeler of money. And then you have to have like a certain amount of, basically like fluidity in that system. Right. And also you need to have a set of consciousness, like your consciousness needs to match that. Like you can't have beliefs that like you don't deserve money or like you're not good enough to charge a lot or like no one's worth your time. Like your time isn't worth anything, right? And make a lot of money. Like you have to have a congruent set of beliefs in your consciousness to like start to like receive, and then also to have the fluid highway of giving and coming back. And so like the way I like to think about it is like I have a cup. Like I can have like an 8-ounce cup. I could have like a biggie size. I could have like a freaking cauldron, right? And that is like a function that I can work on through the consciousness work of my ability to be a great receiver and maker and giver of money. And so for me, like that only works, that idea really only works if you believe that there's some force that is like supplying, like some force that's supplying it, right? Like where is that coming from? Where is this fluidity coming from? And yeah, so for me, like that's another one where there'll be lots of times where like just overcoming those scarcity ideas, right? Like I could believe that there is some infinite supply that I can tap into, or I could believe that, you know, I need to work harder, make more money, which is what I believed for a long time. And that's less fun.
Yeah. I think it's really powerful what you were talking about the capacity to actually adopt it, because it's easy to declare a belief versus to embody one, right? And like one of the most helpful things I've ever heard about intuition was this idea that intuition is, I don't have a frame right now of like a higher self or continuity across like timelines or like lives, but is that intuition at a base level is an awareness of the unconscious. And so it's like that idea of like even like a belief like is something that's like so deeply known that it seeps into our unconscious. So then we're naturally evaluating life through that lens, right? And you've talked about it before about like that like inside out idea of like we're experiencing life as we are versus as it is.
Dude, 100%, man. It's like we have this like invisible box around us that defines our sense of possibility and defines the way we do things, right? And it turns out that those are a lot more malleable than we've been led to believe.
Yeah,
in my experience. And I think people, there's like a continuum of like the effect of belief that people believe in. Like some people believe that, yeah, beliefs are like whatever. Some people believe that your reality literally gets reflected back to you. Like this reality is just a reflection of whatever your consciousness shows. So like beliefs are like literally what you're going to get. And I tend to orient more towards that. But like, even if you don't believe that, like, you got to buy into the idea that your actions are defined by what you believe. Like, you believe eating a certain thing, you eat a certain thing because you believe it's going to be healthy or not.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I find that spectrum continues to expand around how formative it is when you start to notice that inflection point of like you doing inner work and then the outer world changing.
Yeah. So we've gone through kind of a myriad of this like fundamental shift in belief from chasing success to fulfillment, orienting towards like true freedom of like our not like acquisition of external success or achievement, but like the freedom to feel the way that we'd like to, respond to our experience the way that we'd like to. And so much else. And I'm just curious, like, when was the moment that all of this spiritual wisdom, all of these different modalities of inner work, that it coalesced and you were like, this is a book. There's a sequence to this. There's a model of, because you're a prolific explorer of wisdom traditions, both spiritual, leadership development, and truly like one of the most prolific and one of my favorite
Thanks, man.
to keep in touch with. And so I'm curious, like, when did you see the through line where you're like, oh, there's something here that deserves to be codified?
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, it's funny. I never thought about like, ever since that, like, kind of like rejecting the Tony Robbins idea, right? Like writing a book. And what happened is that I was grabbing lunch with a buddy and we started to share like very vulnerable stuff, like guy stuff. Like, hey, like when I was in 7th grade, this happened with this girl. I was mortified, right? Like, you know, we don't need to go into details, but at the end of that conversation, I kind of led first, right? With like, yo, dude, here's happened to me.
Yeah.
And then he opened up. And this is one thing we talked about at Junto that you clarified for me in a big way, which is like, you know, you're a leader by like showing up with your emotions, like, and like letting it rip with like the story that we talked about with the yelling or the breathwork stuff.
There's some yelling, just to clarify.
Yelling.
Yeah, there's definitely there's some
yelling,
groaning,
shaking,
some yelling.
all kinds of weird stuff.
Yeah, totally.
But it created permission for others is the point.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's like, you know, this is one of the most meaningful conversations I've had in my life because I've never told anybody this. Dude, I haven't told my wife this. And I was like, wow, that's so interesting. And I was taking it back. Went back to my house and I was like taking a shower and I was like, wow, all I did was just tell people about my story and that changed that guy's life. He said it was one of the most interesting conversations he ever had. And it just like came to me. I was like, I need to start sharing this in a book. Like, there needs to be a book about this. And so the next day I just got up and I just started like barfing on a Google Doc, right? And it was a long journey to get to like a cogent narrative and framework, right? But there was a knowing from that moment on that, hey, like this needs to be put in something and packaged up in a way where it could really help some people.
I love that. You know, it represents something that I think of as a distinction between a purpose and a calling, where purpose I often think of as the commitment to the service of something greater than the self, whether that's a cause or a community or a craft. But a calling is when we take our unique lived experience and use that as fuel to commit to the service of something greater than the self. And it's like one of the true sweet spots of life where you just realize it's like, oh yeah, what I've gone through, even if valuable to one guy, was objectively. He shared that with you explicitly. And that idea of when we can just look at our life and make a choice to inspect it so deeply and to then share, to create, to find the words that do it justice, which is an impossible task, which you've like taken on that Herculean effort. And you said it's like, Scott said to me when we got here, he's like, you know, your book is done when you can't fucking look at it again.
Right.
And so it's like, and like just that, right? It's like, so to look at your life with that level of introspection and then to try and create and do this wild, nebulous experience, being human, justice is wild. And so, and you talked about the inspiration and what's your hope for it? And I often think about it in this way of, if someone reads this book and then they go and they have a dinner with their buddy, what are they going to tell their friend this book was about?
I think people would probably say this is a book for ambitious people who want to figure out how to live a spiritual life. And it's very practical. I think that's what my hope is, what they would say. And I think for me, like the reason that I care about sharing this stuff so much is because of all the shit I've done, right? Like athletics, job success, whatever, like this path has been what has been most meaningful to me. This path of self-understanding and evolution and all of these things that we've been hovering around, like it's been the best, you know, it's been like the most epic thing of my life. And so for me, like there's a clear delineation in the quality of my reality, which is like before I got on my consciousness journey and after.
Yeah.
And my hope is that all those people who are like on the edge, right? Who are saying like, yeah, but I want to have a dope house, dude. Yeah, but I want to sell my company. Yeah, but like all the yeah buts, right? They can read a book like this and say, wait a second, I actually can do both.
Yeah.
You know, and that fires me up because on the other side of that, there's more people who will get to experience revelation.
Yeah.
And revelation for me is like my favorite thing, right? It's like when you have those insights where you're like, dude, this is why I'm in the way that I am.
Yeah.
Or like, I mean, it's just the best.
Yeah.
And as someone in transformation work, I'm sure you can appreciate that.
Totally, man. Yeah. It's like not even, you can do those things, but so much more, right? That you're not even aware of. And like, what I'd be curious about, because I already mentioned this, but you're this prolific explorer of all these different wisdom traditions, is who are the people that have been most impactful for you on your own journeys? Who would you call out as the people who most shaped? You've mentioned your teachers like many times. I think it'd be amazing if you could actually speak to. Yeah.
So, great question. I would say there's this woman named Carol who's my teacher, who's like
just Carol,
70. Well, she's not on the internet.
Yeah.
Right. Like she's like a 70-year-old.
You got to know about Carol.
Yeah, man. You got to get the text intro. And we've been meeting every other week for about 6 years. And she is associated with this lineage called Ren Shui, which I've, done teacher training in and has been my kind of main source of study. And so she's definitely been like the bedrock for me. And I would say like that body of wisdom has also been like kind of the biggest influence on me as well. But, there's a lot of people that I deeply admire too outside of that. Like, I would say like, that's like the kind of the self-realization type people. And then there's like people like Diana Chapman, that we both know, like conscious leadership, where it's like, okay, but how do I actually like implement this into my company or my career, right? And so I have a deep respect for those type of people too. Joe Hudson being another example, like I think he's amazing. And Michael Singer, I would put on that list too. Like the Surrender Experiment, that's like catnip for the tech bro.
Totally.
Because it's like, the guy sold $1 billion company and all he did was just let go, right? And so we're all like, okay, cool. I found a new, better way to like get what I want. But like that story was just so moving.
Yeah.
And he's got a lot of other great stuff.
For people who have never read The Surrender Experiment, because I think that you actually gave me that book.
I did.
Before I read it for the first time.
I did.
You were like, this recovering tech bro needs some catnip.
That's right.
And it was very effective. But what's the story of Michael Singer, if you were to put it in?
Well, he basically was a dropout economist who turned into like a yogi who like all he wanted to do was just meditate in the woods all day. And he just decided that he was just going to like surrender to whatever life gave him. And through that process, he ended up starting a spiritual community in Florida, and like people were just like showing up, and he's like, I don't know what to do. And then he like went to Radio Shack one day, and it's like, what's this coding thing? He's like, I don't know. I guess I just like doing it. And then that turned into $1 billion company. And so his book is this incredible anecdote to what's commonly told to us about how reality works, which is like, you need to like take it by the balls and like use your will and like make all the choices. Like, I'm just going to see what life gives me. And he had incredible results, and just a super, super wise, interesting guy. So that's a definite recommended read for anybody listening.
Yeah. And it's interesting, right? Because it's called the surrender experiment. But if you think about that, and you mentioned it about Radio Shack, it's like, what was the genesis of this $1 billion company was that he was just curious about coding, right?
That's right.
And so he just started coding, which then led to, I think it was like accounting software or something like that, right?
There's a question I wanted to ask you,
Yeah.
which is, have you experienced any part of your journey where you've been able to look back and you've realized that you were led to this place like perfectly? Like everything that you've done before this was actually like perfectly designed so that you could do what you do now?
It's an interesting question, and it was actually going to be one of the final ones that I asked you. And if I look back at it as perfectly designed, I don't think that it could have happened any other way. And I am so fundamentally grateful to be alive and for the gift of my life. So anything that has happened, I have a profound sense of appreciation for. Everything that I'm doing right now in this moment, I appreciate, and everything that I can ever fathom ever doing, that is like the essence of my spirituality, is like the gift of life. Like that's baseline. That's my spirituality. And so, but if I look at the things that led me to this moment and what I'm doing, I think that it was a choice. I talked to you about a calling, right? Of like, what is my unique lived experience, and how can that fuel me to create, to live a life of integrity. And so much of, I think for me, what it was these experiences of pain early on. And like for me, the separation that I felt was like social, right? It was because I had a lazy eye, couldn't look people in the eyes, because I was white growing up in public school in Hawaii and experienced a lot of racism and racial discrimination. And so when I got to high school, I just wanted to put on the mask and perform and learn all the right things to say and questions to ask to belong. And I just felt this clenching in my belly anywhere I went, because I just had this whole story of who I needed to be and that the real me was not okay, didn't belong. And then, when I started to have some of my own awakening about like, through this practice called Gestalt awareness practice, we've talked about it before, but I had the first experience of ever just really being myself, allowing myself to connect to thoughts and feelings, sharing them transparently, and seeing, much like you just did there with your buddy, it's that my own experience of being exactly who I was in that moment created space for other people to be themselves. And so it's like, so all those moments that led to that of just like, actually, it's really hard to be yourself. And I've experienced that viscerally. And if I can find the courage and build up an arsenal of tools and skills to do that constructively and kindly, like I can just being myself to the best of my ability just creates space for other people to be themselves. And I just want that so deeply for everybody that I meet. And so yeah, like of course it's all led me to right where I am right now. And I'm curious, like I just talked about that, about how my own pursuit of authenticity and radical self-expression feels so inextricably linked to service, of liberating other people's voice and authenticity. And we started this by talking about how fulfillment is really this sustained sense of well-being, right? And so I'm curious for you, it's like a part of me also says like that it's focused, it's self-focused, it's self-centric, which societally we've been conditioned to say is wrong, right? To focus on the self.
Totally.
And so I'm curious, like, how do you put that, like, how would you respond to that? I don't even need to say anything else, but that the spiritual journey, like, can it be focused on that sustained sense of well-being, like without some aspiration to contribute, give back, serve? How does that land on you?
Well, I think for me, it's an organic, like that desire to contribute and support others is an organic emergence. Like there was lots of like do-gooderness earlier in my life of like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm going to do this because because it's a nice thing to do. It's the right thing to do. Like give to charity, like all these things. Right. And it wasn't really authentic. If I'm being honest, it was to be well-liked. It was to be well-perceived. And a lot of it happens for me with this like opening of the heart work is that your perception literally changes. And you genuinely want to do good things for people. You genuinely want to contribute. You genuinely want to conserve. It's not that same choice that it was before. And like I straight up can't do things I used to do. Like I can't be deceitful. I can't lie. Like it just does not work anymore.
Totally.
For me. And it's not like I'm making a choice. It's just who I've become. And so it is very interesting that it's like all this like self-focus this could seem like a bad thing, but my experience of it at least has been that like by prioritizing this cleanup, if you will, that's continuously ongoing, like I just become a much more loving person.
Yeah.
And that just flows outwardly naturally.
Yeah.
And by the way, like I think a lot of spiritual teachers would say like the best thing you could do to support others is actually, it's just like how you are in your presence and your being. It's not like doing all these good deeds, right? And I've seen that with my kids where it's like I notice when I'm in a very calm, loving, peaceful state, my daughter is too.
Yeah.
When I'm super like wired, triggered, whatever, it's like her nervous system's impacted, right?
Yeah.
And so you see it even in those ways. And so, yeah, I actually think it's I actually think like prioritizing this work, this inner work and this consciousness stuff, it's like the least selfish act you can do because it will have cascading effects on everyone that you meet.
Yeah. The service comes naturally. It's
exactly
inevitable.
Exactly.
Right?
That's right.
So Scott Britton, we're heading towards the tail end of this interview, and you've talked a lot about the heart, but we haven't actually got into it. And so what I'd be curious about, because it seems so central to you, that there's been this expanding of the heart, the shifting of the perception of what has been your journey into the heart and what makes that such a central aspect of your consciousness today and your frame.
Yeah. So I'd say, first off, I never really knew much about the heart. Like, it's kind of funny. It's like this like blood pump. We need it to live. But like, why does a heart look different than the heart in our body when we like see the symbol? Like, why is there all this like Sacred Heart Catholic school? Like there's all these like references to heart across all these things that are just seem markedly different than the blood pump. And the reason is because it's my belief that we have an energetic heart as well. It's a lot of names for it: spiritual heart, sacred heart, energetic heart. You can find it in all different texts all over the world. And yeah, basically like when we're children, this heart is like fully open. Like it's the emotional center. It's like the crying flows, the love flows, like everything flows, and it gets kind of shut down over time as we become adults to protect ourselves because we don't feel safe. And we have all these patterns that develop. And so my journey to opening the heart has really been seeing what those obstructions are to it in my consciousness, right? Like, which are a lot of like beliefs, their ways of looking at things, and going into them, feeling them, allowing those things, like those suppressed emotions, those feelings, those like things that are no longer serving me, to be let go of, and then bringing back in those open-hearted qualities, like love, like trust, like gratitude, like a deep reverence for life that you talked about, with the gratitude to being here. And so I think for me, it's almost like a muscle that you build, right? Where you can just like do reps to like you purify these things that are obstructing it, and your heart gets stronger, your capacity to feel gets stronger. Like that's an interesting thing I didn't even realize is like, you know, I cry and I laugh and I feel things that I didn't used to at greater magnitudes, like amplitudes, right? And to me, like that is the heart. Like that's your heart. It's your heart is more able to do its thing. And so, you know, this is just like a thing that we're not really told how to work on, but with a lot of these practices in different traditions and different things that I know you teach, like you can start to build that muscle and restore it to its natural state that you had like when you were a kid.
And so with these final moments, I'd love to invite you, Scott Britton, to connect to your heart. And as you get ready for this book to go out into the world and do whatever it's destined to do, what's just a final message for anyone who's listening to this that it might impact of just what you wish they could know about the nature of reality, the nature of how they're pursuing what they're pursuing, like from your heart, what would be a final message you would leave our listeners, our viewers with today?
Yeah, I think it's to know that life is always conspiring for you. It's just a question of how you look at it, right? And whether you use it. And, you know, I fully believe that. Like, we live in a universe that is benevolent and it wants us to have all the things that we want, which, by the way, most of what we want is evolution. And so that might be why things might seem difficult right now. But if you choose to look at it in that context, maybe it'll shift some things for you. Thanks for having me on, dude.
Cheers to that. Well, team, let us know, when's the book dropping? What's the best way to connect with Scott out in the ethers?
Yeah, so book will be out early October. I'll make sure you have a link for your people. And yeah, if you want to follow me, probably Substack is the best way to do that. You can just search my name, Scott Britton. And I'm just super grateful for being on here, man. It was really, really dope. And I love your wisdom, and you're an amazing host, and very grateful for this opportunity.
Yeah, brother. I feel like from the first moment that we chatted, I was like, that is a real dude who I have very real respect for. And for those of you who got a taste today, I really do mean it, that it's like in the absence of Scott striving in SaaS as a vertical, like now as a creator, he's just inspired and so dialed and systematic in how you think about doing what you're doing. And so I'm just inspired by you as a man and as a creator and a person, and just really grateful that we had our time today, man. And it's like, I feel such a desire to hug you even so far away in these white chairs.
We're going to get a big one in at the end here.
All right. I love you, brother. Thanks for joining.
Bro.
Yeah.
Thanks, man. Now we get to hug.
Did we do it?
Yep.